participants here in this conversation. You guys might have heard me in the past talking about project management, but today I'm here as the founder and managing partner of Boston Insights. It's a advanced analytics, clinical supply chain advanced analytics platform. And I'll be talking to you about a little story about how project management helped in transforming supply chain. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I just turned the recording on, so it's about a minute late, but sorry.
Sorry, don't do all this. Yeah. All right, so moving on. So project relates very well to supply chain management. We're found in many of our texts. As practitioners, we're becoming more involved in projects, whether the projects be a small piece of an overall reframing of the organization. But as supply chain practitioners, it's not necessarily that you manage to master project management techniques. What do I mean by that? Well, we don't look for all of our practitioners to be PMPs. Nice to have, but the general planners, buyers, a lot of people do not have a PMP. Okay, so it is being incorporated into our management principles for our certification programs. It can be found in your CPIM, CSCP, CLTD. And really, it's a large basis for the new CSTC. And I'll talk to that in a little bit. So, Raj, if you have anything, feel free to jump in.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Please continue.
Okay, anytime, jump in there.
Sure.
Okay, so what is the role of the supply chain management project manager? And well, it's the implementation of the initiatives that a company has. Okay, it is based upon establishing relationships with your suppliers. Also, internally, you have to establish a collaborative and strategic relationship with sections within your own organization. We often talk about sales and operation planning, or sales and operations planning and inventory. These are the type of collaborative and strategic relationships that you would need as a supply chain project manager. You would also be looking at working with vested parties to establish fair KPIs. And that requires you to set out what a fair KPI is going to be, and to work with the interested parties to make sure that everybody agrees that that key process indicator is fair to all the parties involved. Okay? And by far and large, you need to be able to analyze the supply chain risks and develop mitigation plans. And if that doesn't sound like requiring some project management, I believe it does. Okay, and anybody who's had to develop mitigation plans would know that. So, moving on. Now, what do we see in project management? I just said you will found in our CPIM, our CSCP, CLTD, and at the CTSC level, it's a whole new level. Most of that certified transformation supply chain is a lot of project management. It involves not only project management, but also a lot of score and digital capabilities model. So this is what we're seeing happening. This is where we're seeing our industry going. Okay. Okay, what is the CTSC? Okay, well, Certified Transformation Supply Chain. When we look at our supply chain, we have to look at several different states of it. Dysfunctional, does it work only in the silos? Or it does not even communicate within the company, effectively communicate within the company. Now we start to look at other states, such as semi-functional. Semi-functional is we get better information flows throughout the organization, but we're still kind of broken. We're not really achieving the goals that we could be. Then we look at integrated process, integrated enterprises. A lot of people, companies included, well, we have our integrated, we're integrated with ERP, we're good to go. Well, maybe, okay. You could have better communication, better collaboration, and a lot of ERP implementations are strictly internal in the organization. Doesn't really change the supply chain. Okay. Excuse me. Now we begin to look at further states such as the extended enterprise, where we're looking at the supply chain in more detail, not only just internally, but we're looking at our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers as well as our customers. Okay. So these are kind of the things that we look at when we're looking at the CTSC, the kind of states that we need to move from to a fully functional extended enterprise, or what we would call an orchestrated state. Way that we can get to that is we need to re-engineer the organization's supply chain. How do we do that? We start off with as is state. This is when we come in and we look at your an organization and you say, well, this is how we're currently doing it. We look at things such as your process mapping, lean mapping. That helps to define what the as is states. We also have an idea of what your organization's maturity level, the states I just described. You all set, Carrie?
Should be. Oh, yeah.
Okay. The next, once we have the as is state, we need to define the desired state. Where do I want to be? Okay. How do we get there? What organizational strategies are going to influence the amount of transformation? The organizational strategies have been an impact on how we're doing business already. What do we need to change to move forward? So in order to do that, we need to understand what the product portfolio is. So, Neerah, do you wish to speak about the product portfolio for a moment? Or?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So perhaps the way I see it is, yes, you definitely look into the product portfolio of the company, but there's also product portfolio means, what are the different products a company owns, but there's also a principle or a approach of understanding the project portfolio, which I can talk a little bit later. But
Sure.
Product portfolio leads into project portfolio, because understanding your product portfolio and then the projects that are getting generated is your project portfolio. So you need to also understand what is your project portfolio, because you want to prioritize your projects in your organization, because there may be a proliferation of projects, okay, and you have only limited resources. So you have to be careful on where you are applying your resources. So that is what project portfolio is. So both product portfolio and project portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj. So that's a great statement of understanding product portfolios. And with the CTSC program, that is heavily in that, you will be dealing with project portfolios, developing projects for that portfolio. And you will be looking at things such as review of the product lifecycle. And product lifecycle review is going to be determine what you're going to keep as a product, what you're going to jettison as a product, new products that you're going to develop, and how you're going to get there. What are we going to do to make our customers happy? Okay, what products and services are they demanding? And we can do that through not only the product lifecycle, but scanning the market. Scanning in the market is going to tell us what our customers are really wanting. And then we'll look at, as part of the CTSC program, you look at the organizational strategies and how they're going to influence your transformation. And what kind of market penetration? Where are you going to? How are we going to better support those transitions? Okay. So the thing about CTSC we need to understand is it also uses heavily uses SCORE DS, as you heard me say at the very beginning. And with the SCORE DS, we also had the digital capabilities model that that CTSC relies upon. Okay, some of the key things that we drive, and even in the SCORE model, will drive this is profit. If we don't make a profit, companies don't last long. So we also, to make that profit, we also have to utilize our assets and utilize them effectively. More and more, we're looking at the environmental aspects of the supply chain. These are things such as the greening efforts, the greenhouse gases, environmental and social responsibilities, ESG. So these are all coming in aspects with the CTSC in the supply chain management. It's becoming much more complicated than many years ago, where the supply chain or the manufacturing would say, I make this, you buy it. There's a lot more to it. Okay, customers are having more to say on what they're buying. There's more influences from society at large, and certainly more of an impact with the environmental. And some of our current training programs are now emphasizing some of this ESG, such as the reverse supply chain, very much heavily into that. But with the SCORE model, with the CTSC in the SCORE model, it has a much more of an impact in that. Okay. So what do we do? Well, with CTSC, we're looking to create a fundamental shift and not just a continuous improvement effort. We still need to make the continuous improvement. Don't get me wrong. You're still going to be looking at doing your lean, lean mapping. The whole purpose of the CTSC is get you to think outside of your old mentalities, to develop those new capabilities, and to have that shift in your supply chain, that you're going to better support your customers, that you're going to better support your market, you're going to ultimately generate more profit and satisfy your stakeholders. Okay, we do that throughout your supply chain. So, excuse me. So the breakout is coming more than just continuing improvement efforts. It's a shift in your thinking. It's a shift in the way of that you're doing things within your organization. Now, the CTSC does have a roadmap, and part of that is you need to create a sense of urgency. Why do I need to do this? Okay, well, if I don't do it, my competitors are going to do it. Yeah, okay. So that's not really thinking outside the box, is it? You want to create the sense of urgency to say that if we do certain fundamental things a different way, then we can prepare our supply chain to exceed what our competition do, to give our customers what they're looking for. So once we've created the sense of urgency, we can plan and prepare for that supply chain transformation. Okay. What is involved in preparing that, planning and preparing for that supply chain transformation? Does project management sound familiar? Okay, you would develop a project plan. Okay, and you would put together and execute that plan, and then you would review it for successes. Now, some of the key things that we're going to talk about here second is potentials for failure. Okay, some of the things in project management that we often see as causing failure is scope creep. Scope creep is that we're adding more and more work beyond what the original project charter called for. That is not funded. Scope creep can come in that certain parties are asked for a little more development in a particular area. The people that are doing the engineering, supply chain engineering, may add in what's called gold plating. Well, I'm doing this, I must also do that. And that causes the cost of that project to go up. Okay. It also adds complexity back into the project that you're trying to eliminate. You want to eliminate a lot of redundancies that exist in the in your supply chain planning. Okay. So we also look at milestones not being met in a timely fashion. Remember, milestones are gateways before you move from one section into the next section. Okay, it's part of your overall planning. Your executive modification of plans. This is another potential failure. The executive comes up, an executive will come up with, well, we need to change it this way.
Luis, ¿tuviste lo de los carros?
Okay, thank you, Beverly. So, executive modification of the plans have changed the plans fundamentally from in a particular way that it cost the car go up. Okay. The other thing is funds have dried up. Okay. You had a particular pot of money that you were doing this transformation with, and the money's been taken away to use for something else, or you've exceeded your budget. Okay. Neeraj, would you consider in a PMP role, would you consider these as points of failure, additional points of failure?
Yeah, of course. Project scope creep is definitely one of the key aspects. It is considered as one of the pillars, one of the core reasons why projects fail. Milestones not met in a timely fashion, that's more about, the scheduling and the project planning and execution. Executive modifications was not so much mentioned, but it is a very, very valid point. Executive modifications happen because priorities change. What happens is that there's a disconnect between the executives and the operations team, and the people who are trying to accomplish certain things. So, and because of the influence that executives have, they say, okay, let's change this. This is more important for us. And when you change priorities midway, that could be a point of failure for the project. And of course, funding getting dried up, reallocation of funds is a very, very valid thing, which happens. And then projects is left hanging high and dry somewhere midway. So all valid points.
Yeah. Is there other points that you want to touch base on? Did I cover all?
Yeah, there could be multiple, right? So the first of all, the thing is the objectives, and I'll what I've done is through my story, I'll try to highlight those things. One of the key reasons for project, failure of a project could be in multiple ways, right? You could deliver a project on time within budget, and still you may not use the outcome of the project. What I mean is, you are supposed to deliver something, right? You delivered it. You managed to deliver it on time. You managed to deliver it within budget. But end of the day, did it benefit the organization? Was the outcome of the project beneficial for the organization or not? What was the ROI, return on investment? And if the project has failed to meet those KPIs, the return on investment or the value creation for the organization, the project is still a failure. Or the supply chain initiative, you may want to call it, it's still a failure. In spite of checking all the aspects on time, on budget, all of those things, right? In terms of completing the project, yes, you have done it. But did the project really deliver what it was supposed to deliver? And there are hundreds of instances, scenarios, examples that we can talk about where the project did not deliver value. The project did not deliver ROI. We have heard multi-million-dollar implementations of ERP systems, but did that really create value for the organization? Maybe, maybe not. So, you have to really think holistically. You have to look into the big picture and then see, okay, what are the things you have to do right to make sure that the outcome that you get out of all the work, all the money that is invested, you really get benefited from that, or the business gets benefited from that.
And that's kind of a key point of the CTSC efforts, the CTSC certification, is to get that benefits for the organization.
Yep.
All right. So, any questions? No questions.
I have a question. Hi, my
Yes.
name's Tess. I'm actually just moved from supply chain to a project management role within my company. So this very much applies to the world that I'm living in right now. What do you think then is the remedy or the main issues that you've come across when a project launches on time, and it's implemented, but it doesn't actually produce the results? Is it getting buy-in from the business process owners, or is it lack of plan, do, check, act before it's launched? What do you find?
Well, you have to have buy-in before you get the project, and you really need to have a sign off on the project stakeholders.
Mhm.
If they don't sign off on the plan, then you either review the plan with the project stakeholders or take it to the project sponsor to have them sort out A or B, right? So if you're doing a revamp of your supply chain, everybody needs to agree what the supply chain is now and what it's going to be in the future state. And that agreement has to be signed off by the executives, the project sponsors, as well as your executive management team. Neeraj, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So see, Tess, it's a multiple factors. It's not just one or two things here, you know. The biggest, most important thing I would say is clearly defining the objective of the project. That is super critical. What does the leadership really want? That objective should be clear. And I can tell you many times I have seen in my career that even the leadership is not aligned. Maybe one person thinks, the VP of supply chain is thinking another one way, the VP of maybe operations or is thinking, and because projects are not to be done in silos, right? Projects have multiple stakeholders. It's cross-functional, right?
Yep.
So if you are leading, if you're the project leader or the project manager, and if you are leading a project and if you really want to be successful, what you want to make sure is, see, as a PM, as a project manager, think yourself as the CEO of that project. So make yourself empowered. Don't think that, okay, somebody is more senior to you, or there's a hierarchy and all those things, right? If you have to because you are given a budget, okay, so you are given $1 million, $500,000, whatever, and you are asked to deliver something. So you are in charge. So even if you're not empowered by your leadership, you have to empower yourself and go and ask those tough questions to your leadership. You have to do that, right? Make them uncomfortable, because unless they answer those questions, and if you have to clearly define what your objectives are, it could be 1, 2, or 3. And I'll talk to you guys about a story of a procurement transformation process. So if you are leading any small or big transformation, make sure you sit with your key stakeholders. First of all, identify your stakeholders, sit with them and ask the right questions. What are you really looking from this, right? And make sure they're aligned and have that documented and signed off, as Paul said. Because you don't want to go back 6 months from now after starting the project and then say, oh, you know what? I didn't think that, this is what we were doing. Oh, really? We were doing that? Nobody ever told me. You don't want that. That has to be that project charter document. That is what your project charter is, where all your key stakeholders, your project objectives needs to be clearly written, documented, and signed off. That is number one. You start from there. And then you work towards your project to make sure that you are moving towards accomplishing those objectives step by step.
Those are all great points. And just to kind of buttress a few of them, if you are in a project management role, do not be afraid, as Neeraj had said, you need to be the CEO of that project. Do not be intimidated by other people who have grandiose titles.
Yes.
They're not
Yes.
empowered. You were empowered by that. So please keep that in mind. Yeah.
May I volunteer a comment?
Sure.
Yeah. As a simplistic example in a generic sense, is that a project may be originally scoped out as a product transfer, OUS. But really, for the organization, the ultimate goal for that transfer is to achieve the volume for shipment. And the relevant question to ask is also, is the market able to absorb that? And that question entails whether, as in the case of some industry, such as if it's a medical supply or medical device, does the consumer of your product have the range of skills to utilize your product now in volume? Oftentimes, when organization breaks down into silos, the transfer team does a beautiful job getting the transfer, all the documentation approved, but only to realize that once in volume, in the thousands, the hospitals do not really have the range of skill set to utilize your product.
Several things come to my mind in not only in when we talk about project management and supply chain, you're going to do a lot of time planning and communicating what the end product is supposed to look like. And something in today's supply chains is poisonous, for lack of a better terminology, is organizations working in the silos. The idea is engineering, developing a product based upon what they're being told by the customer and then throwing over the fence for manufacturing. Those days are dead. They're going by. Become the buggy whip makers of the future. If you do not communicate across your board, across all your silos within your function, as well as with your customers. So you need to understand what the product is to break down those silos. Before you even get to developing a product for a hospital, you're going to need to have great communications. You're going to need to understand what the customer wants. So really, you're starting with the end point, you're working backwards, and then you're overlaying that with project management techniques.
And I just want to add, I just want to add one more thing. See, a lot of times the project manager comes late into the game, right? The executives make the decision. You are hired as a PM or you are given that assignment to manage that project, right? And some of these decisions are either already made or the leadership has not thought about those things. So even if you're coming late, it is okay to take a pause and look into the big picture, understand the ecosystem in which you're working. The example that just was given by Chuck, that even it was though the project was about product transfer and that happened well, but eventually the outcome failed, right? So it is okay to ask those questions. Don't just assume that whatever has been given to you to deliver, you just keep running blindly at 1,000 miles an hour and deliver that. So it is okay to pause, look into the objectives, look into the bigger picture, ask those questions, take some time, and ask those tough questions.
Yep. Great points. Great points. Any other questions? I have an apology to make. Neeraj, when I put together this slide here, I forgot to add your contact information in there.
That's fine. That's fine. So I'll tell something, guys. Is it okay, Paul? Can I say something?
Yeah.
So guys, the way it was working was, I thought I'll not create any slides or any presentation. Okay. I let Paul, Paul was driving this, the whole the CTSM thing. Did I say that right? The acronym right, Paul? It is
Close enough. We'll go with that.
okay. So the thing is, guys, what I'm going to do today is, for whatever the remaining time is, what I did, guys, is instead of just talking, I did put my thoughts on a few slides, Paul. So I'll
Sure.
share those slides
Yep.
because that way, people can follow the thought process. That is one reason.
Yeah.
But even before I get into this, I would request the audience to just say yes or no. How many of you are in a projectized environment? What I mean by that is, are you in just doing operational work in supply chain, or are you also responsible for delivering projects? I just want to see how many of you are part of delivering projects. I know Tess just mentioned, so that will give me some idea.
Okay. If people, let me stop sharing. Okay.
So
Neerah?
2, 3. I'm watching the 3,
Yeah.
4, 5. So 5 are yes, I'm saying. 6.
Okay.
Any more people? Hopefully some more. At least let's get to double digits.
If
7.
you're involved with vetting a supplier, you're doing project management. You're
Yes,
doing project.
yes, yeah. Think about that. Yeah. Some more people? Any more responses? Come on, guys. Maybe. Okay, I'll take it as a yes. Any more?
All right.
Okay, fine.
Let me,
go ahead.
I got one slide I want to share to show
Sure,
people.
sure.
And this is the references I used for a lot of the CTSC learning system. So when you request, will be in the deck should you request it. I am going to stop sharing to let Neeraj share.
Yep, sure. Thank you, Paul.
You're gone there.
So I'll share my screen, guys. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So guys, this is no way a presentation. I just want to caution you. Sorry, why is this? Okay, so why is this? Hang on. Is this visible enough?
Yes.
I'll not go into display mode because I sometimes get an issue. If this is okay, I'll just keep it this way, guys, for everybody. So my plan was not to do a presentation. So this is not a presentation. It's just putting my thoughts on some slides so that you guys can follow what I'm saying. Okay, so don't go by the beauty of the slides. It's just the content, right? So as Paul mentioned very nicely, right? And before that, I want to make one comment, Paul, is I'm so glad that ASCM is now finally realized the value of project management, because this is something that I have been practicing for the last 20 years and preaching for the last 20 years. Ken knows that very well. I've been teaching project management for APEX or ASCM members for many years, right? And this is something I realized many years back, that all supply chain people, all supply chain professionals should have a decent amount of knowledge in project management. The more you have, the better it is, but at least you should understand the basics of project management. And today what I'm seeing is, and I'm so happy about it, that ASCM has made it into a program called supply chain transformation, right? So, and I was talking to Paul, I said, this is what I've done my entire life. And today I'm so happy to see ASCM bringing it. So guys, this is a little story about how supply chain transformation can be successful with project management practice, right? So moving on. So this is a story about Alex, a supply chain director at Zenith Pharmaceuticals. These are all fictitious names, guys. So I don't think there is any Zenith Pharmaceuticals. Even if it is there, I don't mean that company. Okay, so that's a disclaimer. Who transformed the sourcing and procurement process at her company. And how did she do that, right? So when she came in as a new director, when she was appointed as a director for procurement and sourcing and procurement at this company, and she was supposed to fix the whole procurement process, because when she came in, she found these issues there. Cost of goods were escalating. It was increasing, right? Vendor shipments were frequently delayed. It was very random. Okay. Inventory holding costs were ballooning. It was increasing because they had to hold more inventory because the suppliers were not quite reliable. So inventory holding costs were increasing. And all these operational inefficiencies were also leading to delaying the patient access to critical medications. So which is basically your end customer was getting impacted. Cost of goods were increasing. Everything was in a mess because the procurement and the sourcing and the procurement process was broken. So when she came in, she started thinking about it like, okay, she was a supply chain expert. I'm sure she was, CSCP certified and all that, and the deep knowledge in it. But just having the traditional supply chain expertise does not let you, or does not help you in delivering a transformation, a supply chain transformation, right? Because supply chain transformation is not just about your traditional supply chain practice, it is also about project management practice. So she realized that pretty quickly. So as we have been talking about, in the last 15, 20 minutes, right? So she realized that, and she said, okay, we really need to understand what our objectives are. So these are some of the objectives that she identified along with her team, with her stakeholders. We need to reduce the operational costs. So it's almost like defining your KPIs for the project, right? So what was her first KPI? Reduce the operational cost by certain percentage, 15 to 20% within 18 to 24 months. So that's your KPI. Minimize shipment delays. Now, minimize by how much, or make sure that you are 99% on time. That was a metric that they put together. And then cut inventory holding costs by 20%. Now, if these objectives are met by the project, even if you ended up spending 3 more months and maybe another $50,000, you would still be considered as successful. Because see, project by definition is there are uncertainties in a project, right? There are risks in a project. So it is not really such a bad thing to say that my project cost increased, my budget increased by 10%, right? As long as you delivered on this 3. However, if you delivered on time and you delivered on budget, but none of these objectives were met, your project still failed. This is something that all of us need to understand. Obviously, the ideal situation would be you did it on time, you did it in budget. That is the perfect condition. But we are far from perfect, right? Things happen, right? So that is something you also have to tell to your stakeholders, to your sponsors, that okay, you have a budget, but is there any variability in the budget? Then what she did was she assembled a cross-functional team comprising of different people, right? Procurement specialists and procurement managers, logistics managers, IT experts, and even your stakeholders because of whom you are impacted. So not only your internal stakeholders, but your external stakeholders. You have to bring in key suppliers also to tell them, guys, hey, this is not working, and because your shipments are delayed, because you are increasing the cost or whatever those reasons are, right? We are getting impacted. So this is not going to work out for a long term. So you have to bring all stakeholders into the game. And then using project management practices, especially, see, now we are moving more towards agile methodology rather than the old way of doing things, which was more like a waterfall technique. You do this first and you do the next thing first. In agile, you do things in small sprints and you do things very fast, right? It's almost like a 2-week sprint or a 3-week sprint, but generally it is a 2-week sprint and you don't want to spend too much time on a lot of documentation. You do things, you improvise, you get feedback, and that's how you move it, right? So what they did using this methodology was systematically analyze the existing processes, which Paul was talking about, the current process, okay, identified the bottlenecks causing the delays. So this is root cause analysis, right? Understanding what is going wrong, why things are wrong, such as fragmented supplier communication. This is, very common issue in many organizations. Inefficient inventory practices, poor forecasting methods, right? So these were some of the bottlenecks that the cross-functional team worked together to identify, and then they defined the future or the desired state of the project. And sorry. Sorry, guys. So they agreed upon, the team agreed upon what was the future state that they wanted really, okay, or the desired state, which was this, right, controlling this. And then based on what the future state was, they decided what they are going to do in the project. So then you nail down the project scope, okay? Then a couple of more things she did was, they transformed the procurement process, so these were some of the things that they did during the project, right? Consolidated suppliers, negotiated better terms, implemented just-in-time inventory practices, and they also decided on implementing advanced analytics tools. So this is also something I want to talk about, guys, that during one project, you may identify initiatives that you may have to do as phase 2 of project, right? So not that you have to, so talking about scope, right? So you have a fixed scope. When you're executing that, you may find certain things that may be helpful to the project, but that doesn't mean you have to do that in the same scope, right? In this current phase, you can identify those things and say, okay, this we will do as phase 2. So these were some of the things that they did. They identified that implementing an advanced analytics tool would be very useful to them. Okay. And then finally, to manage the stakeholder expectation and ensure transparency and accountability, the team used clear communications channel to align stakeholders and proactively manage risk. Because communication and risk management, as Paul was mentioning in some of his slides, are very, very, very critical. So guys, what I just said, these 4 or 5 points are not exhaustive by any standards, but these are some of the key areas that you got to think about and what Alex did in her project. Okay, moving on, so obviously by doing these things, within months of project completion, they were able to achieve some of those things. Like you have to give some time also, like you complete the project and you give 6 months or a year's time. And they were able to, accomplish reduction in operational cost, reduction in shipment delays, inventory holding cost, all of these went down. And if you have a way to measure that, this is a little bit of a challenge, guys, I'll be honest with you, but still you have to figure that out, how you can measure it, and then show that, okay, by implementing this project, this is what you have accomplished. And then finally, the key takeaways, what did she do right? Strategic planning. So that part was that we have been talking about, clearly defining objectives, scope, timelines, and budgets. Risk management, proper communication and collaboration, assigning the right resources, so basically the stakeholders, the right resources, data-driven decision-making, and change management. So during a project, what will happen is you will change certain things, right? There will be change in the process. There will be a new tool that you will adopt. So all of that is a change, and change management is very, very important for projects. So make sure you think about change management, how you're going to incorporate it. There could be training sessions, engaging the stakeholders, making sure, whatever changes you are implementing are adopted by the community or by the stakeholders, right? So these are some of the key takeaways, from that, from the success of Alex's project. So my final question is, does Alex's story resonate with you? Do you feel that, you run into such problems, and by, implementing some of the things that Alex did, it could help you in managing your supply chain initiatives better? I leave you with that question.
A quick comment that I just want to make sure everybody understands. When we talk about project management in terms of agile or waterfall, as Neeraj has said, waterfall tends to have everything defined all the way out. a lot of times with Agile, we have certain elements of that project are not fully defined, that we're doing that. We're making those adjustments as we go through that Agile project management. Did I get that right, Neeraj?
Yep, absolutely. So it's a small, yeah.
I was going to make a comment about in the world of software, we're constantly trying to. Most of the software engineers are skilled in the waterfall approach, and because it gives us comfort to know that we're covering our bases, especially with the fact that if we make a change somewhere along the line, then we account for it all the way back and forward. Everything's documented and everybody's understood. When we jump into Agile, I think Agile is a world where we're trying to cut through, we wanted the red tape of bureaucracy of having to go back and continuously do the same things over and over again, even though we know it's right. But we're trying to see if we can sneak ahead and get the low-hanging fruit and get the job done. I mean, I think everything should be thought of when you apply Agile. It should be thought of that when you're using it, the overall outcome is not something that's going to be very devastating for safety or security or whatever the product that you're producing. If it's something of a simple nature, the most you could ever get in it would be, in an Agile world, would be some loss of costs. But if it causes something to, when somebody drives a car and that part fails and then causes that car to crash, and then you find out you didn't take the safety precautions, Agile might not be the approach. I'm just saying you should be able to think about what you're making so that it is, all safety is understood. Because down the road, big bucks are lost. There was what's his name?
There are a number of areas.
Joe DeStefano, what the heck was his name, from the Duran Institute, gave a good example of how the Japanese offloaded an entire safety system for their airbags and then didn't really dig into how it was to be done, following up on it, making sure it was all done like you would do on a waterfall approach, but more give it a see you later. And then when the bag didn't work or caused people to die in accidents, they wanted to push it off as, hey, it wasn't our fault. It was our supplier. And then
the name of the company is Takata, and the Japanese companies had outsourced the airbags to Takata.
Right.
Okay, but in terms of Agile, we use that a lot of times when we don't have all the elements clearly and 100% defined. If we're building a bridge, we select, all right, we're going to put the bridge over the Merrimack River right here. Well, part of it is what you're going to do. Part of the Agile is you're going to say, this is where the bridge is going to go. We're going to do the soil sampling. Okay. Other parts of it is still yet to be defined, such as where we're getting the steel from. I'm Easter egging. But Agile actually started a lot in IT and in software, where we had the end product, what we wanted the end product to look like. We had the code, but how do we get the code to match that end product? Okay. So, sorry.
Those are all very, very valid points, actually. So see, guys, there is also an approach called a hybrid approach, right? So which is basically the best of the two worlds, wherein, so for example, I'll tell you guys, when we talk about Agile, don't think of it just like doing it every 2 weeks, right? Think about this like, okay, if I have to build a car, right? And if I'm building a new electric car, I'll take an example. How am I going to do that? And that is basically, you come up with a prototype, right? You basically come up with prototype, and then you say, okay, is this good enough that can be tested, right? Or, we can run some trial runs, right? And then you do some trial runs, and then you improvise on that. And then you do more trial runs, and then you improvise on that. So the point I'm trying to make is, for infrastructure projects, as Larry just said, right? Obviously, Agile is not the best way, right? Because you can do certain things in agile way, but you have to design, complete the structural design, right? You have to know what your steel you are going to use and all that. That cannot be agile. I completely agree. So but the execution could still be agile, as Paul was saying, that okay, decision on which vendors I'm going to use, that could be delayed. That doesn't have to be decided upfront, So the world is moving. If you look at all the largest companies in the world, if you're talking about, Apple, Netflix, all of these companies that have grown, 1,000% in the last few years, right? They have all adopted agile methodology, but that doesn't mean agile works for everything. You have to adapt and adopt. You see. So if you take agile process, and I feel like it would not be right to blame the agile methodology. It is to think about the company who is using it. They probably did not think about testing that well enough, right? So that's their planning. There's the fault in planning. It's not the fault in the process, the approach. It's how you use an approach for your product is something that you have to think about.
Yeah, very well put. Very good.
So yeah, that's all I had, guys. If there are any questions, so yeah, if you want, I'm happy to send this, save this and send it to, Ken, and you can distribute it, Ken. If not, then that's fine.
Yeah, send it this way. I can convert it to a PDF and we'll get it posted right under Paul's PPT. We'll also post the recording. I put the link for the survey, as well as the certificate, as well as where to find the link for the past recordings, so you can see where we're going to post this. Hopefully by this week, everything's done by volunteers for everybody. Wow, you guys are amazing. Absolutely, absolutely amazing. Looking at it from two different points of view to some extent, and yet it all comes out to the same outcome at the end. That was really good. So nicely done, Paul and Neeraj. Nicely done.
Thank you. Really good presentation.
And we're
Learned a
gonna
lot.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I don't know if there's any Q&A. We'll do that in a second. Also, the two speakers, Paul and Neeraj, you'll be getting a gift card from us for the great speaking that you did from the Massachusetts chapter. Is going to send you that from Sandeep. So if you get an email from Sandeep and it's an Amazon gift card, it is not a spam. It's not fake. It's real.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
You guys are great. So is there any Q&A before I kill the recording? And some people are quiet and shy and they want to wait till I stop recording. I can do that too. But any Q&A for our speakers on the record, and then right after that I'll stop the recording so they can do off the record questions. All right, I'm gonna hit stop recording.